Hello, and a very warm welcome to Cultural Communication Confidence with me, Victoria Reynoldson. And welcome to this particular episode 13, all about Roadmap to Presentation Success. Now, I'm talking about this because maybe you're like most people, where you get a presentation topic that you need to prepare, and the first thing that you do is open up a slide deck and start planning. So you start writing some slides, you start moving them around and maybe adding images and changing the font and so on. The reality is, though, this isn't necessarily the best way to plan your presentations. And what I really want to share with you today is a particular approach, which is quite structured, around how do you really think about the key messages, the story that you're going to tell, and then actually the flow. How are you going to make sure that it lands in a way that is engaging, that people will really follow the key messages, and in particular situations where we have an action or a set of actions for our listeners to then do at the end of the presentation as a next step, then this will be a great way to focus the attention. So I'm looking forward to sharing this with you today. Now, where it starts is with clear, simple communication. Now, if you've been listening to other episodes, I'm sure that you've heard me talk about this before. And in fact, I did a whole episode around this in episode 11. So if you haven't had the chance to listen to that episode, feel free to go back and listen to that one, because that's very useful for all types of communication, including presentations. But a couple of the principles which are particularly important, I think, for presentation success are starting with a couple of questions. The first question is why? What is the purpose of this presentation? So get clear about what it is you're trying to achieve and write that down so you've got that as a sentence and it's really clear in your mind, because that means you'll make sure you focus on that as you develop the presentation. The second question I want you to think about is who. Who is listening to this presentation? How well do you know them? If you know them well, what's the agenda that they might have? What type of questions might they ask? And if you know that in advance, that's really helpful, because that means you can personalize and tailor the approach to the audience, to the listeners, and anticipate the types of questions they might ask. So that's a great starting point, asking ourselves these key questions. And then the next step is I want you to start with the finish. Now, I know that sounds a bit strange, but I want you to really think about, what does the end of this presentation look like? For most people in business, that usually ends with a summary and then actions and next steps, because normally we're not just sharing information for information's sake. In fact, we normally need the people listening to do something. Usually they need to react, maybe give feedback, perhaps make a decision. Or it might even be that they need to go away and do something with the information you're sharing. So start there. Again, what you want to make sure is that everything leads to this end point. Once you've got that end point, work backwards. And the way we're going to do this is grab yourself some post-it notes, stick-it notes, sometimes they're called, and a pen. And I want you to think about the key messages that lead you to that end point. And I want you to be quite disciplined about this and think about the 3 top line messages that you really want to land. So you're going to take the stick-it notes and write one idea per post-it, okay? And what you're then going to do is perhaps build up a bit of detail. So maybe you need a sub-point, which you then write on the post-it note. But once you have all these post-it notes, the way I do it is I lay it out on a large table. For some people, they like to put it on a wall or, on a window if you don't have a clear wall. But the idea is you're capturing all the key ideas that you need to share. It helps you to focus on the messaging and making sure everything leads to that end point, which is so important. And it also means that you can start looking at the flow of the story. So it means you can start moving the ideas around so that they flow in a logical sense and the story builds up to the conclusion and that action. So that's the planning bit. And now I want you to think about the roadmap bit. And this is the last part before you start writing. Roadmap is a very simple technique, but it's really about relying on repetition to make sure that people are very clear on the messages that you're sharing in your presentation. The reason to use this is that people get distracted in presentations. I'm sure you've been there as well. So it's really about reinforcing those messages at key points so that if anybody gets distracted or is trying to do something at the same time as listening to your presentation, they don't miss it. So the roadmap starts with signposting. This means flagging what is coming up in the presentation today. For example, today we'll be covering 3 key points, a review of the project, then we'll move into the current project status before finishing with next steps. This is a classic signpost. We then tell them what we're going to focus on first. So first we're going to look at the review of the previous project. Next, you give them that detail. And of course, that means you repeat it for all your key points that you need to make. And then finally, the 2 final stages. The next stage is you need to summarize. So it's really helpful at the end to tell them what you told them and summarize the main messages, the 3 key points that you wanted to land before you go into actions and next steps, which we started with the planning there. So hopefully those are very, very clear for you. And there you go. A simple 10, maybe 15-minute exercise just to get very clear on the messaging, the storytelling, the flow, and structuring it in a way that repeats so that people remember those key messages. Now you're ready to open up your slide deck and get writing. As we come to today's end of episode, I would really like you to try this out. I want you to take your sticky notes and your pen and have a go. So when is your next presentation? Have a go at trying this out and see how this works for you in getting very, very clear about your messaging and making sure that you have that focus before you start the writing process. And I would love to know how it goes for you. So please feel free to reach out to me. My contact details are all in the show notes, or you can contact me on LinkedIn. I'm Victoria Reynoldson, my personal profile over there. And I'd love to know your experiences. How does this go for you? How did it make a difference to your presentation success? And if this is an area that you or maybe your team or leaders in your team feel that they need more support in this area, particularly around presentation communication, then please feel free to contact me as well to talk about my individual coaching and team training programs, as I think this is a critical area for business communication success. And if you've enjoyed listening to this episode, then I would love it if you could subscribe. That means you get an alert when the next episode goes live. And if you find it useful, why not share it with a colleague or a friend who would also find this valuable? It'd be great for them to also benefit from these insights. Thank you so much for joining me today. I'm Victoria Reynoldson and look forward to seeing you next time on Cultural Communication Confidence.